After being vilified by the press and members of Congress, the Covington students and their families faced a wave of harassment and threats. Yesterday, the head of the high school had to cancel classes. Do these students have any recourse, any defense when the strongest members of our society try to crush them? Well, this morning on Fox and Friends, lawyer Robert Barnes warned that media outlets could be sued if they don't retract the slander against these students. Watch.
By Friday, everybody needs to retract and correct any false statements they have issued about these kids. That includes any major member of the media, that includes any major celebrity, that includes anybody with a substantial social media platform. If you have said anything false about these kids, they are willing to extend you a 48-hour time period, a period of grace consistent with their Christian faith, for you to, through confessions, get redemption and retract and correct and apologize. If you do not, the next week you may be a defendant in a lawsuit.
All right. No idea if that guy knows what he's talking about, but our next guest does. Libby Locke is an attorney who represented the UVA dean after she was defamed in the famous Rolling Stone fraternity gang rape story, which turned out to be an utter fabrication. Libby Locke joins us tonight. Libby, thanks very much for coming on. You have deep experience in this. The broader question is, how do the weakest members of our society, high school kids, defend themselves when the strongest people in our society, those with tenured positions in cable shows, defame them?
Sure.
What's their recourse?
Sure. Well, they can bring defamation claims or claims for false light, Tucker. There are a lot of potential defendants here that they could pursue. With all due respect to Mr. Barnes, some of the ideas that I've heard him express are not viable options. You can't bring a class action for defamation, and you certainly can't sue a congresswoman for tweets that she made.
You can't. So that's relevant because we have a new Democratic member of Congress who accused these boys in tweets of things that are clearly not supported by the evidence on videotape. So they're lies. They can't sue her?
No, she has absolute immunity under federal statutory law, and this is exactly where these students need to take Donald Trump's invitation, President Trump's invitation, and go to the White House and encourage President Trump to open up the libel laws.
So wait, why would a member of Congress, if I, as a private citizen, attack someone, say something that's I know is untrue, and accuse them of a crime, for example, I could be sued, but a member of Congress can't be? Why?
No, there's something called the Westfall Act. The Westfall Act creates blanket immunity for all federal employees, including members of Congress, for stupid comments, false comments, all sorts of different claims that you could bring against a member of Congress, an employee or another normal citizen, are exempted for federal employees. And there are some claims that federal employees can be brought against them, but defamation is not one of them at this time. And this is where Donald Trump, President Trump, should really fulfill his campaign promise to open up the libel laws here. This is one of the areas where federal law prevents Mr. Sandman and his family from getting recourse against this Democrat member of Congress.
So if an employee of a news organization writes something that is provably untrue and damaging to someone much weaker than he is, and that happened a lot over the weekend, that person's news organization is not responsible for it, right?
Well, they can be. They absolutely can be. Here, Mr. Sandman is a private figure. He's not a public figure. You're not going to have the New York Times or Sullivan actual malice standard. That higher burden that would apply is not going to apply to him as a private figure. So liability here is on a negligence standard. That's a much lower standard. And the media outlets who published this stuff and didn't reach out to him for comment, I think they have real legal risk here, Tucker.
Would you recommend to the families of these boys, whose lives I think it's fair to say will be overshadowed by this, deeply, and it's deeply unfair, would you recommend that they pursue a legal course?
Absolutely. They should hire experienced defamation counsel, someone, not just an experienced lawyer, but someone who knows this area of the law and who can really evaluate legal claims. It's what we did in the UVA case, where we were looking at federal versus state court, which jurisdiction. Because, look, this is an area where you don't want to swing and miss, because if you lose even on a procedural issue, it's going to be reported as a vindication of the truth of the defamation.
Libby Locke, one of the most successful lawyers in this small but important field. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me.